When I was invited to this commission, I tried to think what truth I might contribute. And of course, the usual scenarios came to mind. The IEDs, the raids, the patrols, the shelling, the bodies, the detainee abuse. But there are a couple of issues that I have found have haunted me most over these past 5 years that I've been home. And I want to talk about those. They are not as grisly as those former scenarios, but I feel that they are every bit as important. The first of these truths has to do with this statement. We are in Iraq to help Iraqi people. I became ensnared in this idea in a couple of ways. The first was that I helped to propagate that idea among the Marines. And further than that, I used it to justify their actions which were not always justifiable. So as these Marines began to kill and be killed, I became further entrenched, further indebted to this idea. We are in Iraq to help Iraqi people. How could I say otherwise with all that I had done and ordered others to do? The second way that I became ensnared in this idea was that I used it to justify my own participation. When the Iraq War started, I had a choice. A lot of others did not, but I did. I had come to a point in my career where I could get out of the Marine Corps or I could take orders. Well, I took orders, and I knew exactly where I was going. I wanted to go to war. Not because I was interested in the political particulars of this war or that war, but because I wanted to experience battle. I wanted to get into combat. I had been training for 10 years with the Marine Corps Infantry, and I wanted to go. Well, I went, and I participated and was involved in many of those episodes that I referred to before. But you know, when I talked about it, I couldn't exactly tell people back home that I went to war because I wanted to get in a fight. I needed a surface rationale. You understand what I'm saying? I needed something to tell people. I needed a cause to stand by. I needed something to tell myself. So when the discussion about Iraq had shifted from WMD to liberation, to freedom and democracy, that became my rationale. So you see how important it was that that be true. You see how important it was that it remained true, because if that rationale was lost, if it were to be taken away, then I would be left exposed as the guy who just wanted to go get in a fight. Well, obviously, over those years since I came home, there was a stripping of my conscience. And I want to talk a little bit about that process. When I first got back, I wasn't sleeping very much, about an hour or two a night. I would get up in the middle of the night and I'd drive into the office, and I would spend the duration of the night reading about the war. Any article that I could find, any book, any story, all of the most gruesome stories, all of the tragedies. I was immersing myself in the blood, in stories that I had no connection to. But I just needed to be in Iraq all the time. My body was home, but my head was still there. When I wasn't reading about the war, I was writing about it. What happened was, when I went to Iraq, I had inadvertently packed Dante's Inferno, so I decided I'd go ahead and read it. And as I did, I sort of noticed these similarities between Dante and Virgil's journey and my own, and so I started taking notes on that. So when I got home, I decided I was going to write a novel. I was going to write an allegory, and I did, and it was huge. I mean, you know, Canto for canto. This thing would have dwarfed the entire Divine Comedy. And looking back now at this fiction, what I realized about it was that I needed to write a fiction. I wanted to have a conversation, but there was no one to have a conversation with. I was the commanding officer of a rifle company. I didn't have any buddies. And you don't have this kind of talk with other commanders. And so I'm stuck with myself. Well, I had to eventually resign my commission. I knew that I couldn't go back, and so I did. I got out, and I continued to write. Except this second iteration I wrote was an analysis. I wrote this analysis of my deployment to Iraq, a detailed analysis, a tactical analysis. And I gathered all the facts and figures, and I pulled together the statistics and the quotes, and I put it together in this manuscript, and I handed it out to a number of my friends, and I said, what do you think? And they all kind of looked at me, they read it through, and they said, yeah, man, that's good. And they had this kind of long, sleepy look in their face. They were completely uninspired by what I had written. I had made the war boring. I couldn't believe it. And that's a tough thing to do. And I got a little bit angry, I'll tell you, at first. Because these friends of mine, these are people who care about the war. They care about these issues. And I said, hey, look, I get that it's boring, okay? You wanted to know what was going on in Iraq. This is it. This is it. Well, I realized this wasn't going to be a good marketing strategy for my new book. And I tried to figure out what was missing. I found out what was missing sort of inadvertently. I was invited to speak in a situation similar to this, but it was fairly impromptu. And I was in a bad place in those days. And they said, would you come up and just share a few of your stories? And I agreed with a six-pack of beer, which I insisted on drinking while I gave my stories. So, and that's what I did. And I told these stories this day. And I was angry. And I was cussing, and I was telling my story, and I didn't care who I insulted. I just blasted them out there. And when I finished, people came up to me, and they said, man, you got me. Wow. And people said, wow, that was something else. That was, brother. And people were buying me beers, and they're throwing their arms around me. And one woman came up, and she hugged me, and she cried. And I said to myself, all of these stories are in the analysis. Did you read the analysis? Because they're there. And then I realized, of course, what was missing. I was missing. I wasn't in the fiction. I wasn't in the analysis. I needed to get back into the story. And that's what I did, and that was the inspiration for Packing Inferno. Now, I bring this up because it's not just about writing a book. It was about, a journey for myself. And this past summer, I rode my bicycle across the country, and I was having conversations similar to this along the way. And I was kind of explaining this idea of tearing down one's own conscience. Not just doing that analysis of an experience or of a political situation, but of one's own conscience. And I noticed that people understood what I had to say, and yet they were scared. And yet there was a reluctance to take on themselves the way that I was taking on myself, exposing themselves. And they always ran to their safe place. Do you know where their safe place was? Their safe place was politics. It was the administration did this, the Congress did that, this political figure or that general, but never, what is my relationship to that? You cannot find the truth in war unless you're able to find the truth in yourself. Thank you.